The 2026 Cubs are supposed to win the NL Central this year. Supposed to. Sound familiar? Well, the Cubs have received high praise from a lot of experts based on the additions they made during the offseason, on top of an already strong 2025 roster. Now, as Cubs fans think that that's all fine and dandy, but we also know that we were supposed to run away with the division last year.
And it never really worked out that way, did it, Jimmy?
Not quite.
Will this be the year that Chicago finally eclipses those scumbags in Milwaukee? Hey, the Bears made the Packers their bitches after years and years of the opposite happening. On paper, it sure looks like something catastrophic would have to happen for the Cubs not to be division winners, but to give credit where it's due, those Milwaukee bums just never seem to die no matter how much they blow up their roster every year. So let's take a look at these Cubbies and see what some realistic expectations are. Now, the starting pitching is kind of a funny group to look at. There's a lot of certainty with this rotation, but also a lot of uncertainty at the same time. Now, how does that make sense?
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Well, the certainty lies in the fact that this group is solid based on what we saw last year. Matthew Boyd was able to pitch more innings last year than the previous 3 years combined, and the most he's thrown since 2019. Jameson Taillon has been the epitome of solid during his Cubs tenure. This guy deserves a lot of credit for how he pitched down the stretch and in the postseason. Cade Horton proved he belongs in the big leagues, and his second half was historic. Him not winning Rookie of the Year was pretty stupid, but hopefully he's got some Cy Youngs in his future. Shota's back, much to the chagrin of some Cubs fans. I like what Imanaga brings to the table. I don't think it's fair to shit on his 2 years here in Chicago based on a poor couple of months coming back from an injury. And the newbie to this rotation is Edward Cabrera. Now, this guy's stuff is straight up nasty. He's a strikeout pitcher the Cubs have desperately needed for a while. And in this rotation, with this defense behind him and his ability to strike guys out, one would have to think that he can easily have the best year of his career thus far. So that's a solid starting rotation. Maybe not spectacular, but more than serviceable to get the job done. But what about those uncertainties I mentioned earlier? Well, injuries happen to every team. But with this Cubs rotation, it's something that could be prevalent to a few starters. Is Boyd over the hump with his previous arm issues? Or was last year's workload and him pitching in the WBC this year going to have a negative effect? Can Cade Horton pitch all year, and can he do so without being on a pitch or innings count? Edward Cabrera has missed time with injuries all throughout his career so far. Besides injuries, what about general performance from these guys? How dominant can Cade Horton be? Or is the league going to figure him out and will he be able to adjust? Is Shota going to return to his form before the hamstring injury? Is Edward Cabrera going to elevate his game and become a dominant type of ace we were hoping for? Or is he going to be a middle-of-the-road guy who occasionally shows flashes of greatness? Now, on top of all this stuff, let's not forget, folks, Wrigley has been pretty pitcher-friendly over the past few seasons. Now, if that trend changes this year, that could be a problem for guys like Shota and Tayo. I don't know if you've heard, but they tend to give up the long ball occasionally. It could be pretty messy if those guys don't always have the wind blowing in to save their asses. And the biggest uncertainty of them all, Justin Steele. Now, he's still the Cubs ace in my book. I love how this guy pitches and approaches the game. He's got that John Lester mentality about him, and it's sorely needed for this team. Steele's due back around mid-season. How is he going to be from his elbow surgery? He's saying all the right things about his rehab, how surgery this time around was so much better than his last one, etc. And that's all good to hear, but it don't mean shit until he gets out there to pitch. Is he going to be effective this year, or is 2027 more realistic of an expectation to see the real Justin Steele? If he can come back and really get into a groove and show he can go come September, that's a guy I want leading the pitching charge into the playoffs. But right now, we just don't know. So overall, I think the floor for this rotation is solid, but the potential is there for some of these guys to make Jed Hoyer's wet dreams come true and exceed expectations. Speaking of Jed Hoyer, let's get into what's turning into a trademark of his, a mishmash bullpen. Now, I like Hoyer, probably more than most Cubs fans. I give him some leeway because I know he gets handcuffed financially by that tight-ass Tom Ricketts. And last year's bullpen was a key reason the Cubs made the postseason. So he's going into this year with the same philosophy. And to an outsider looking in, they might think that the Cubs have this bullpen thing figured out. Don't spend a shitload of money on relievers, take the throwaways from other teams, and a couple of them will come through, and rely on some of your own homegrown guys to get the job done. And yeah, last year that worked. That's a credit to Hoyer and his front office cohorts, the pitching coaches, and the players themselves. But let's not forget the previous seasons before the 2025 bullpen. As much as last year's bullpen got the Cubs into the playoffs, the previous year's bullpens constructed by Hoyer were a major reason they didn't make the postseason. He treats the bullpen like playing blackjack. Sometimes you hit 21, sometimes you bust. So with that being said, it's tough to really get an idea of how this year's version of Jed and Council's experimentation will go. Daniel Palencia will start as the closer, and he's got the stuff for sure, but I'm not 100% confident in him for the entire season. He seems like a guy who lets things just stay in his head. I'm also not sold on Porter Hodge. I do like the additions of Phil Maton and Hunter Harvey. Maton's been solid for a while now, and Harvey is a reclamation project. Now, if he can come back to what he was, and Maton does what he's done, those are two solid strikeout guys that can have a big impact for this team. And that might be what Ben Brown turns into. Him becoming a dominant reliever may be the right path for him to go down, and if so, with his stuff, I'm good with that. But right now, in spring training, it's hard to really know what this bullpen is. And we also know that how this bullpen looks on April 1st is going to be a lot different than on August 1st. All we can hope for is the Hoyer magic to work again this year. When I look at the outfield, it's not as cut and dry as maybe I originally thought. Ian Happ is going to be Ian Happ. Solid defense, a couple of hot streaks where we're begging for the Cubs to re-sign him, and stretches of hot garbage where calls for him being DFA'd are going to be shouted from the rooftops. But at the end of the year, he's still going to be Ian Happ with his average around 250, 20 to 25 home runs, 80 to 85 RBIs, and on base around 34% of the time. Might as well throw in another Gold Glove in there as well. Right field might be interesting this year, depending on how Matt Shaw does out there. But as of right now, Seiya Suzuki is the man out there every day. I thought Seiya actually played right field better than Kyle Tucker did last year. Offensively, I think I'm in the minority when I say that I just don't trust this guy. Every year, it's the same shit with Suzuki. Every spring training, all the Cubs players say that Suzuki is easily the most talented hitter on the team. Well, every season, this guy doesn't do much with runners in scoring position except swing at a 58-foot pitch in the dirt, then take strike three down the fucking middle. And it was looking like last season in the first half, we were finally getting the Seiya Suzuki that was going to live up to the hype. He should have been an all-star. And then he shit the bed. Not only did he shit the bed, but then he wallowed in said shit for 3 months. 90 RBI at the break, finished with 103. That's not a slump, folks. That's a fucking disappearing act. His numbers are deceiving during his time in Chicago. Yet, metrics say he brings a lot of value. I don't care. I watch the games. Going off the eye test, this is a guy that gets his stats bumped during garbage time. He's one of the least clutch hitters I've ever seen, and I really hope he's not a Cub for much longer. Now it's time to discuss our center fielder, Pete Crow Armstrong. Talk about not knowing which player to expect. PCA is quite the dilemma. He was one of several Cubs that fell off the face of the earth offensively in the second half last year. At least with Pete, he is probably the best defensive player in baseball. And if he can actually get on fucking base, he makes things happen. Hopefully with Bregman here to keep an eye on him and having a full season to learn from, PCA will continue to progress at the plate. He doesn't need a 30-30 season to still be impactful. Regardless of how he does offensively, his defense is what will keep him in the lineup every day. As far as the infield goes, this is the place that's the easiest to know what to expect. It's also the cause for the least amount of worry. Alex Bregman is going to be a huge pickup, both in the clubhouse and on the field, and the Cubs need a guy like him to lead. His offensive production and Gold Glove defense is going to be a nice addition. Dansby Swanson is still an elite defensive shortstop. He made some great plays last year and quite frankly, pretty much single-handedly is the reason the Cubs advanced past the Padres in the playoffs. It's a fucking joke that he wasn't even a finalist for the Gold Glove. Now he needs to be more consistent at the plate. I'll take his 25 home runs, but for Christ's sake, can we at least make some kind of contact with runners on? Hopefully Council keeps him in the bottom third of the lineup all year. It seems Dansby's best production last year came when he was batting 7th. So if he's down there, he actually becomes a pretty valuable offensive player. Nico Horner's a second baseman as of now. Hopefully he is for the rest of the year and the Cub for many more years to come. He's just a solid ball player who does things right. Gold Glove defense, doesn't strike out, makes contact, gets on base, which usually leads to him finding a way to score, and he can drive guys in. His lack of power doesn't bother me when he produces in every other aspect of the game. He's a top-of-the-order guy, and I hope he acts as a table setter this season. At first base is the underrated Michael Busch. I think we're at the point with Busch that you can pencil in around 30 home runs, and he should be able to drive in around 100 and have an OPS in the 800s. While he may not be a gold glover at first, he's very good defensively. I do hope he figures out how to produce a little bit against lefties this year, but the Cubs did bring in Tyler Austin, who should be more serviceable to play periodically than Justin Turner ever fucking was. Now, the catching position could be interesting this year. God bless Carson Kelly for what he did last season. He was supposed to be the backup, but injuries forced him into an everyday role, and he went above and beyond, especially during the first few months. But this job belongs to Miguel Amaya. Let's hope he can stay healthy. When he has been, he can really add something to his offense. However, the concerns are there whether or not he can come back from his injury last year, and if he can, will he continue his ascent and be able to stay off the IL for prolonged periods of time? He's such a wild card, but if he doesn't get hurt, his value could be off the charts for this team. To round things out is the DH spot. It sounds like it will be a revolving door with Moises Ballesteros getting the chance to prove himself as a major league hitter this year. Suzuki and Bregman should be getting some at-bats here as well. Now, it will be interesting to see how things unfold if Matt Shaw takes to right field like he did at third base last year defensively. If Shaw plays well in right and continues his hitting from the second half last year, that will probably push Say into a more consistent DH role. But what happens if Mo Baller is hitting well? Does he see himself catching a lot more than expected this year? Ideally, Shaw, Seiya, and Ballesteros are all productive players this season, and this is going to be a nice problem to have. So what are your thoughts with this version of the Cubs? Comment below with your confidence level in his team. For me, with how this roster is looking and the track records of the players, it should be a slam dunk for this team to win 90 games. The Central Division is theirs to lose, especially with Milwaukee seemingly on the verge of regression and Freddie Peralta out of the division. But as we can all attest to, this is the Chicago Cubs, and stranger things have happened. I really think, barring multiple injuries, the Cubs can win 95 or more games this season. A lot of their postseason success this year will depend on the starting rotation going into the playoffs and what substantial additions, if any, the Cubs add at the trade deadline. And I do think even Steele shows that he's back. They need that ringer of a starting pitcher that can dominate the playoffs. If that happens, it may not be 108 years between World Series championships. Bottom line, this is the most complete Cubs roster since 2016. There are no excuses this year.
The Bears are who we thought they were. And that's why we took the damn field. Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
And the Chicago Cubs win the World Series.